on solving linear equations. This time we're basically going to be doing the same stuff as last time. We'll just be doing it more than once in the same equation. I'll remind you guys about our high school definition of solve. Find all values of x that make the equation true. You'll be expected to know that on tests and quizzes. And today we're going to be doing more than one step, so we need to do the steps in the right order to make our lives easier. You don't need to do them in this order, but things get really complicated if you don't. So you want to do the steps in the opposite order of bed mass. And let's have a look at example 1 to see what we're talking about there. So in example 1, we've got 2 times x minus 3. So there's two things keeping the x from being on by itself here. We're multiplying by 2 and we're subtracting 3. Bed mass, order of operations, we'd multiply before we subtracted. So as far as our step order goes, we want to deal with the subtraction first. You guys remember from last time, we want to make this a 0 instead of a minus 3, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides because negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And I've got 2x plus 0 is just 2x. And on the other side, I've got 5 plus 3 is 8. And now you guys remember that 2x means 2 times x. And I want it to be 1 times x. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I've got 1 times x is just x. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And now we need to put that into the original equation. I'm going to replace the x with a 4, putting the 4 in brackets, because putting it in brackets tells everyone that that used to be a 4. The same way putting a capital letter shows everyone that it's the start of a sentence. Okay, and now we need to do normal bed mass, normal order of operations to figure out what the left side equals. So the first thing we're going to do is do the 2 times 4 is 8. So I've got 8 minus 3 equals 5. 5 equals 5. Your checks should always finish with 5 equals 5, 10 equals 10. If you get to this stage and you end up with 15 equals 5, you did something wrong, go back and check. Okay, let's have a look at B. Negative 4 equals 5 plus 3n. Again, we've got two things keeping the n from being by itself, the 5 and the 3. The 5 is addition, the 3 is multiplication, so we want to deal with the 5 first. 5 minus 5 is 0, so I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. That gives me negative 9 equals 0 plus 3n is just 3n. And again, I've got 3 times n. I want that to be 1 times n. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, so I've got 1 times n is n. Perfect. And again, put it into the original equation exactly the same, except for instead of n, I'm going to put a negative 3 in brackets. And again, during my check, I want to use normal bed mass. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9, so I've got 4 equals 5 plus negative 9. And 5 plus negative 9 is negative 4. Negative 4 equals negative 4 is a true statement. So when n equals negative 3, our equation is true, which means n equals negative 3 is a solution to our equation. Okay, here we go. C. I can't see it yet. I need to pull it down. Oh, math teacher humor. Okay, here we go. This time we've got negative 3 plus the thing with our w, and we've got w divided by 2. So I want to deal with the negative 3 first. Negative 3 plus, oops, not 4. Negative 3 plus 3 equals 0. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Negative 3 plus 3, sorry, that is a 3. It's a little ugly and beat up. So I'm going to have 0 plus w over 2. It's just w over 2 equals 7. And now I want to have 1 times w. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. On the left side, because this is a fraction, it's best to show it as 2 over 1. And on this side, I can just write it as times 2. 2 over 2 is the same as 1 over 1. So I've got 1w over 1, which is just w, equals 14. And again, I'm going to throw that into the original equation. Notice everything's exactly the same, except for instead of W, I've got a 14 in brackets. And now regular order of operations, regular bed mass, negative 3 plus 7 equals 4, negative 3 plus 7, that side equals 4, and I've still got a 4 on the right side. So it is true. I know I'm going pretty quick here, so make sure you guys are pausing and rewinding when needed. Okay, D is a little bit weird. It looks like we've only got one thing to get rid of. We need to get rid of this 2. 2 minus 2 is 0, so I've got, subtract 2 from both sides there, so I end up with 0 minus x. 0 minus x is going to be negative x equals 5. This can mess you guys up sometimes. You don't really always remember what negative x means. I'm going to remind you guys that negative x is the lazy way of writing negative 1 times x equals 5. And now it's easy to see that if we want 1 times x, we're going to have to divide both sides by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1, so this is just 1x or x. And on the other side, 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5. Well, let's make sure that worked. Put it into our original equation, 2 minus negative 5 in brackets equals 7. Notice this is exactly the same as our original equation, just with a negative 5 in brackets instead of the x. Subtracting a negative is like taking away a debt. So if someone takes away my $5 debt, it's like them giving me $5. So this is actually the same as 2 plus 5, which means I would have $7, and the right side is 7. 7 equals 7 is true. I'll remind you guys, if you end up with 7, or if you end up with like 18 equals 7, you did something wrong. Go back and figure out what it was. Right, E. E, there's 2 different ways to do this. So I've written the exact same question twice. The first way we can do this is to simplify the left side first. So exactly like we did in the last unit on polynomials, you remember we can just multiply the 2 into the brackets. So 2 times x is 2x, plus 2 times 3 is 6. You guys usually prefer to do it this way because this is something you were able to do last unit, and now it looks exactly the same as all the other questions. We've got the 2 and the 6. It's times 2 and plus 6. So opposite order of bed mass, we want to deal with the 6 first. 6 minus 6 is 0. 2x plus 0 is just 2x. 8 minus 6 is 2. I should mention right now, you guys have probably noticed I never use the word cancel because it has no meaning. We're either trying to make zeros or ones to get x by itself. Okay, and now we've got 2 times x. I want it to be 1 times x because that's just x. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we've got 1 times x is just x. And 2 divided by 2 on the other side is also 1. Okay, so that's one way we can get x equals 1. The other way we can do it is we can think about doing the opposite order of bed mass right from the start. So in this case, we've got something in brackets, and we've got multiplication. So if we were going to do bed mass, we'd do the bracket stuff first, and then the multiplication. Opposite order, we'd deal with the multiplication first, so we want to deal with the 2 first. It's multiplied by 2, so I want to do the opposite to make it a 1, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 equals 1, so now I've got 1 times x plus 3 is just x plus 3. On the other side, I've got 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now I want x by itself, so I want it to be x plus 0. 3 minus 3 is 0. So I'm left with x over here. 4 minus 3 is 1 over there. Okay, and now let's make sure we did that right. I want to write it exactly the same as the original, but I need a 1 in brackets instead of the x. So notice I've actually got brackets inside brackets. It's up to you how you want to do the two sets of brackets. You can use square brackets for the big ones, or you can just make the outside ones a bit bigger. Obviously, in this case, I've just made the outside brackets a bit bigger. Okay, and now normal bed mass. I need to do the brackets first, so I've got 2 times 4 equals 8, and 2 times 4 is 8, so I get 8 equals 8, which is correct. All right, 2 more questions. F, 3x plus x equals 20. Hopefully you guys recognize the left-hand side as something we can simplify from the last polynomials unit. One way to think about it is we've got 3 French fries and 1 French fry, which would obviously be 4 French fries, or 4x. The other way we talked about it was we drew the same shape around the 2 x's, so we'd have 3x plus x is 4x. Either way, we end up with 4x equals 20. And now we've got 4 times x. We want it to be 1 times x. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So I'm left with 1x, or just x. 20 divided by 4 is 5. Okay, the check. Notice the reason why we use x for both of these spots for the variables is because they're both the same number. If they were going to be different numbers, I'd use x and y, or x and a, or something like that. But because they're both x's, they're both 5. So when I do my check, I end up with 3 times 5 plus 5. And notice those both used to be x's, so they both need to be in brackets. Also notice, we need to do our check in the original equation. We can't do it in the 4x equals 20 equation. We need to find all values of x that make this equation true. So our check needs to use the original equation with 5's instead of x's. Okay, and now bed mass, we're going to multiply first. 3 times 5 is 15. And notice now, I've already put the brackets on the 5 to show that it used to be an x, so I can drop them on the next line. I don't need the brackets on the second line. 15 plus 5 is 20, so I get 20 equals 20, which is of course true. Okay, last one. G. You'll remember from E, there was 2 different ways to do this. I'm going to do it the simplification way, where we simplify the left-hand side first, just because you guys seem to be more comfortable with that. So I'm going to go 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times negative x is going to give me minus 3x there, equals 5. And now I've got 2 3's in there. This is addition, subtraction 3. This is a multiplication 3. So I'm going to first want to get this guy to be 0. So I'm going to go 3 minus 3 is 0. So I've got 0 minus 3x is negative 3x. 5 minus 3 is 2. Okay, and then I want this to be 1 times x, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. 1 times x is just x. 2 divided by negative 3. I could write it as 2 over negative 3, but I think it's easier to think about if I switch the negative to the top. Notice they're both a negative fraction. It's just easier to think about with the negative on top, because then we owe 2 slices of 3-slice pizza. Okay, let's do our check. We need to write things exactly the same as the original, and I'll use square brackets on this one because I've got brackets inside brackets. So notice there's 2 ways to do that. The first time I just used bigger brackets on the outside. This time I decided to use square brackets on the outside. Both are fine. Okay, I want to do the stuff inside the brackets first. We're taking away a debt, which is the same as adding, so let's rewrite that as 1 plus 2/3 equals 5. And notice now I could write this as 1 2/3, but that doesn't really help because the next thing we're going to have to do is multiply. So let's change this into an improper fraction, or basically get an answer as an improper fraction. 1 is the same as 1 over 1. And we've got a denominator of 3 here, so I'm going to want a common denominator of 3 here. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom here by 3. Geez, there's a lot of 3's in this question. So I get 3 over 3 plus 2 over 3 equals 5. And now I've got 3 times 3 slices plus 2 slices is 5 slices of 3-slice pizza. Alright, just about there. Now we're multiplying fractions. It's easiest to multiply fractions if they're both fractions. So I've got 3 over 1 times 5 over 3. Because we're multiplying, I can simplify this early. 3 over 3 is the same as 1 over 1. So on the left side I've got 1 times 5 over 1 times 1. 5 over 1 is just 5, so I end up with 5 equals 5. So when x equals negative 2/3, our equation is true, so x equals negative 2/3 is the solution to this equation. That's all.